Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Thanks for stopping by, is really what I should say. I am waiting for a Stone Hobbit to pop back in. We had about, golly gee willikers, 90 minutes of pre-show unrecorded. But I let her know that I am going to be recording. Well, let me get this microphone over so y'all can hear me. So, yes. Just waiting for Stone to pop back in. We had some really good conversations, and one of the things that we were talking about was what we wanted to focus on. We've talked in the last couple of days, even last week. We haven't gotten any recordings out because there are other topics that we ended up talking about that were not going to be something that would be appropriate to record. So one of the things that we were talking about today, and today is May 31st, 2025 here in the US, and we did mention it last week that we wanted to talk about the SSP, so the Secret Space Program. And we kind of shared I think it was last night and even the week before, about there seems to be kind of something going on that's like three different factions. And one of the things about the SSP that we talked about was that, there was a real one and there's a fake one, but there's also like a third thing going on. It's not just the real, it's not just the fake, it's also what's being disclosed. And I think that that might be, for lack of a better way of putting it, might be a hybrid. And we also talked about how this artificial intelligence is interfacing with some of this and might appear to be, I mean, this is just coming to me now, that it might appear to be something that if you were less aware would be an artificial intelligence, but really it might be something that is just not of our realm, as it were, and something that would be considered, us being carbon based as far as the physical form in this realm. We're looking at something that is quite different. The construct, the origination of these beings are manifesting in a lot of different ways. So one of the things that Stone brought up was talking about the ship that she had encounters with, and we had this little discussion about how some of these ships are more than likely beings themselves, and we perceive them as ships, and they have a consciousness and awareness. I don't know if there's sentience. I would imagine that some do and some don't, depending on the craft. And it's also going to depend on how much interface is required between this essence. And I don't think it has anything to do with being human. I think it's the energetic essence of who and what we are is what is manifesting and producing these craft. So that's kind of what we talked about a little bit. And then we also briefly talked about the space conflicts, but you can insert a word that starts with a W. I need to take a sip here, my lemon water. Excuse me. But it's, I think a lot of what might be perceived as a space war, we kind of rely on what Hollywood has put out there, and that kind of shapes our awareness. It shapes our, not even necessarily an awareness, but it kind of can shape how we perceive things coming in, and we're going to give a more credibility to those things that we've accepted through the programming processes that we've gotten exposed to with the Hollywood stuff. Um, so we also briefly talked about some of the things that were more about the travel and what the public is exposed to of what they're perceiving as travel. And Stone had some really good insight as to what that might look like. There she is. Yay. I thought I lost you. I know, right? So I kind of started talking about welcome, my dear sweet friend. All about this is going to be about the SSP, talking about what these craft are and what we're kind of being presented with as far as what are they? Are, all these spaceships, these craft. And one of the things that we just had started talking about was that they are entities, they're beings, they are connected to us. And I think some of the public awareness is going to be tainted by Hollyweird. And I don't, and you pointed out too that the the craft don't travel in ways that we have been programmed to believe how they travel. There are definitely portals. I actually had a staff member tell me that in the building that we're working in is they walked in, it was early, and all of a sudden they felt really dizzy and their head tilted back and they looked up, they saw a portal.
Yeah.
They saw the swirling portal. And I let them tell their story, and it was like, cool. Do you know what it was? And they said, no, I don't have any idea. And I said, well, I said, you're fine. You got through it. She goes, yeah, I thought it was just kind of like a weird thing. And it's like, yeah, it's pretty different, but it was probably a portal. It was something that your particular biome wasn't used to experiencing. So it kind of threw her off a little bit. And I think that the whole idea of what you were talking about, these spaceships, and I already talked about how they're living
Yeah.
beings and that they are integrated with us. They're part of us. There's so much we talked about before we even started all this. That kind of links into that as well was the idea that the spaceship, they're living beings, and what they're constructed of, and how they're able to morph, reshape themselves to accommodate whatever it is they needed to do. Speed, density, being able to maintain its structure safely through portals. That's all part of it. We also talked briefly about the biochemistry, the bio nanotechnology and chemistry, and the liquid nano. And I just have all this stuff. And maybe my particular, and I think Hollyweird also has some good stuff out there, but you have to kind of filter it a little bit. And the thing that started popping into my head after I drew that clam-like shape. You said, "Oh, that's my ship." And I said, "Well, that reminds me." Afterwards, I was like, "Oh my God, that reminds me of the Flight of the Navigator." It was a
Yeah.
1986 film. Do you remember seeing that? And
Yeah.
and that was I can't tell you how many times I watched that movie when it came out. This is
I don't
way
don't even remember too much about it. I just remember that the closest reference to the ship that I have was what the navigator had, and it was a bioorganism.
yes.
It was a living entity within itself who knew as soon as I came into its bubble, if you want to call it that, its fray, it would be able to recognize my biochemistry. So it was able to read me, it was able to read my density. And we could pretty much go anywhere. We could, its job was to be able to analyze the densities that we went into to make sure that it was safe enough for me to travel. And through the process, it showed me that it wasn't, it can suffer wounds. It can reach high speeds where I'm just walking around like nothing's any different. It can go such low speeds that I'm also just walking around like nothing's anything different. And I remain the same age. That's the biochemistry within that organism. The exterior structure is just to keep itself protected as it goes through the different densities at the same time. There's some absolute magic to some of these ships. I mean, I've seen these beings come in as the orange. I used to call them plasma spheres, but they're more luminous spheres because plasma is different to the luminous. It's more like a flame type energy that I see around this sphere because it's circular shape. But these have shown they've dimmed out, so they go from being the bright orange red to the white to the golden to the total invisibility. Watching them go up into a cloud and move as a group, and you don't suspect anything because you're looking at a cloud moving across the sky. But when you see them go up into the cloud and how that cloud functions, you see that there is a difference between that one and the actual clouds. So they showed me that, and then they showed me this type of ship, this energy form of ship can come into my room through the roof of my house and morph into two separate beings and then morph back into one and then take on different appearances, human appearances that I was familiar to. So it had a conscious thought, it could already tap into my mindset and it could take on the appearance that was most familiar to me, not as in a threatening form, but that's where my human brain was at the time, but as in a form of, okay, familiarity, you'll communicate with me if you feel comfortable with me. And then watching the different type of dimensional ships that come in like orbs. But there's differences, and this is what I want to get onto about the AI as well, being able to spot the differences between reality, well, the reality as we know it, and AI doctored reality, because that's all coming into play with it as well. So, with these ships, when this orb ship came in and it was pulsating, and it had a black solid mass inside it, which it didn't rotate, it didn't change its axis. The dot stayed where it was, wherever the ship orb, whatever you want to call it, pulsating orb went to. Um, so that was very different to the orbs that just come in and go straight through. Now, through, working with this ship, it showed me that the dimensions that I go into, I'm not necessarily in this form, this physical form. And this is what I want to get to with the SSP. I want to question these people who are saying they're SSP. I want to know what your human here on earth training is and how it is connected to the SSP jobs that you had. I want to know where you got your training from. What were the emotional tactics that they put on you to make sure that you were stable enough to go and do some of these jobs in the first place, because they can't have wimps going out there doing the job. And if you're just a desk jockey, well, you're just a desk jockey. So I want to know where that comes from. So that's why I've got questions for all these out there claiming to be SSP. Yeah, we've done some missions. I know I've done missions like you wouldn't fucking believe, but that's fine. I can't tell you the locations that I've been to, but I can tell you what they look like, the interaction with the people that were there, the beings that were there, the food they were eating, and the job I had to get done. But I can't tell you if this main one that I'm thinking about right now did not seem like it was a ship or a planet, but it had a docking bay and it had layers to it. So the first two layers that I got to see were very military, very exterior. There was no animals, there were no children, there was no climate. You know,
Wow.
and then you go in further, and she showed me food that they were eating, and the different chemicals within that food group that represented two to four different foods that we have on here on planet Earth. So I found that very interesting. But it was the training, like, being put into situations here on Earth that you don't calculate, you don't expect, and then suddenly you have these abilities that get you out of the situation. You don't know how it happened. Yeah, I want to hear this SSP from these people claiming to be, super soldiers. Show me your programming. I know a lot of people suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder and don't know where it comes from, but it doesn't take very much to actually take 5 minutes out of your time and actually examine where these anxieties, these dispositions come from. I don't look at it as a fear state. I look at it as a trauma state, something that we've experienced. We haven't been able to analyze it because it was a major stress factor and we had to move on. We didn't have time to hold on to it. So that's what PTSD is to me, whatever label you want to put on that. It
Yep.
can be it
And I
can
think
get
that,
quite complex.
yeah, exactly. And I think that the one word that you really brought up was really, really important, was about getting down to programming and
Yep.
about these trauma states that we have. I don't understand. I mean, I'm going to use something personal here. I have this weird, uh, it's like this weird anxiety. There were two things. One is about deep water. I don't have any problem putting my feet. If I can see the bottom and it's not super deep, not a problem. But it's deep water, and if I can't really see the bottom, that's a problem. And I live in an area where every day I go to work. I have to cross a major river through our area. Where I was working before, like not even, maybe 8 months ago, I had to cross two bridges.
Yeah.
And it did. If I had to stop, because there's like a traffic light there, if I had to stop and I was on the bridge, and the one wasn't even that deep of a river, it was like maybe 5 to 8 feet deep. It's quite wide, but it's fairly shallow. And I was like, this is irrational. It's irrational. I should not have a problem with this. And it was even worse if I was on the bridge, stopped, and I would have another vehicle come up, and I can feel it. I mean, I
Yeah,
think I told you I lived in New Zealand for about 3 years, and I was kind of looked like I had 9 heads because I could feel those little shakes. I could
yeah,
feel the ones that were three, and it would hit me in my sacrum. It would go right up my spine, and it would be like something hitting me in the back of the head. So I know I'm kind of sensitive to that sort of thing. So when this whole water thing comes up, it really does get down to those experiences, the traumas, and what programming, like you said, that we've experienced to be able to deal with some of this stuff. And it's not even necessarily going to be something that you experience here.
yeah,
It doesn't necessarily mean if you're one of those people that believes in past lives, it doesn't even necessarily have to be relating to that. It could be something where you are not in this realm that you experience that you're carrying forward into your awareness here. And that's how it appears to be irrational. Same thing with spiders. And I've kind of made some spirit inquiries into it, and I was probably eaten at some point. I don't know. Maybe I was an annoying fly. I don't know. But you know what I mean, though. You deal with this stuff the best you can with where you're at with the tools you have. If you're not
yeah.
comfortable with that, you need to figure that out, whether it's within yourself or reaching out to somebody else to help you. But that's a whole nother gig. But were we talking about clouds at one point?
Oh, probably.
Because I know I wrote something down about um there were clouds and something was cloudy, and there one of the things I had talked to about somebody about this whole SSP thing and about entities and plasma. We talked a little bit about plasma too, that these entities are actually plasma beings. And if people are talking about the sun's not a hot ball of fire. They believe it's plasma.
Yeah,
So and it's obviously a very concentrated form of plasma, but there are plasma beings that we don't necessarily see.
yeah. When this being, this ball, okay, this luminous ball that looked like fire came in my room, the first things I was thinking was, and I've had these other experiences where I've ended up in rooms of white light, right? And it's like, am I blind? This is my blindness. What is going on here? How come I found myself in this situation? And it was when those luminous beings came into my room, I thought, shit, is my room going to catch on fire? I can't feel any heat. I'm not feeling any heat from this being, so I don't think I'm going to get burnt. It's touching the end of my bed. My bed's not catching on fire. I'm relating it to a flame because that was what my first senses were telling me, that it was some sort of flame light being. And then when it split into two, it took on the appearance of a male and a female. So a male energy and a female energy, both in separate humanoid forms. So, and it was like, okay, so now I'm seeing this one energy ball turn into one being, turn into two beings. Then it morphed back into one bigger being, and then it took on the human skin appearance. So when I go into these states, when I have these experiences, I'm analyzing everything, all the landmarks, everything that's showing itself to me has a reason for me to be seeing it, sensing it, feeling it, being there. And a few of these occasions, I mean, this last week at the work where they've been sending me, my mission have have been to do with a lot of walk-in communication, and as the 3D aspect here, when I'm out there journeying, I've had enough telltale experiences now that when the other side see me, they don't see me as we see me. Okay, they see me as an energy of light. And
Yes.
as me here as 3D form, when I see an orb come in, the first thing I want to do is get my camera and capture it. Okay, now capture a shot of it. See that I saw it. See that it actually existed. So that's me showing that my attention is now being caught by their presence. So me as an orb going into another dimension, because I won't go into a dimension in this form, only in the more 3D solid forms. The frequency that we see are our planets. That's what I can go to. But these other dimensions I can't go to in this form. I have to step out of this form and become another form. So therefore, when I find myself in these dimensions and I'm like, okay, what do I look like? What do I look like? The first thing I do is I find a landmark to get a reflection. I find landmarks to get dates, names, places, locations. I try to get addresses or, lampposts. Is there some sort of language that I understand what it says to me? Because that's the other thing too, is when I go into some of these dimensions, I know they're not talking English. I know that they're talking telepathically, but somewhere in between this on this telepathic connection, there's a translator, and it will translate whatever language that we speak in so that we can understand what's being said. It's a frequency. It's just a cleaning of a frequency. Um, and
It's almost
so
like not even necessarily a cleaning. Is it more of an alignment?
yeah, it's like an alignment. It's a translator.
Yep.
It's a translator, okay, of frequency.
Yep. Yep.
And so when I get the message, I can act accordingly to the message. I can't even remember what the fuck I was about to say then. Um, they work so fast with me.
I
It's in
know.
one.
I know. You got to get it out.
No, with some of these different experiences, they've shown me that, you don't you when I go into this other dimension, I'm just thinking one of the many. I couldn't work out why I was being chased by these humanoid looking figures, men in black, chasing me. But right when I went into the dimension, the little girl that was there was saying, they know you're here, you've got a second. And when I turned away to see who she was talking about and turned back, she was gone. Right. So she pulled me through like it was two different dimensions at one time. I felt like I was stuck in the next dimension and she just yanked me through. And then I saw them, and when I turned back to ask her, where am I?
Yeah.
Where where have I landed? Lost in
Yeah.
space.
Exactly.
He was gone. So I started to run because these guys were running towards me. But when I was able to get a glimpse of my reflection, I wasn't in human form. I was just like, you see a flare of light going past a glass building. Well, that's what I looked like. I was just an energy. And when I come back into this form and I'm taking photos or I see orbs flying around the room and stuff, then I realize that, okay, there's other beings that have come in. They're either here to communicate with me, they're going to let me know, or they're just driving through and they don't know I even exist here. There's the crossing over of the planes and all the parallels and all of this. There's so much activity that's going on right now. And I'm seeing a lot of people popping. This is when people will be walking along the street, suddenly freeze in their pose, like what is happening in the matrix, and then all of a sudden they stumble and they carry on going and they don't realize what's happened, but they're on autopilot. They know where they've got to go to, they know the tasks they've got to do, they know their family and all of this, and then when they click out of that, it's like being bitten by a flea. You don't feel it until it's too late.
Right.
When they get back home, then they start realizing, oh, that's not the food I like. I don't know who those people are that are right in front of me. Where am I? Who am I? Look in the mirror and go, what the shit am I looking at? You know, this is people popping. I'm seeing it everywhere at the moment. I'm seeing like the fender benders. People will be driving along. It's like if somebody suddenly gets brain fog and then they're back again and it's like, oh shit, you stopped before I realized you were going to stop and I crashed into you. Wait a minute, you're behind them. You should be alert enough. So there's these little stumbles people are making, like walking into lampposts,
Right.
walking into each other. A lot of the attention is being on the phone. Not They're not looking at the space that they're walking in. Their space is so crowded now with different types of energies that are going on. So they can
So,
be.
so before you move on with that thought about crashing into lampposts because they're distracted by the phones, this is really interesting because this popped into my head as you're saying that there are a lot of little clips out there of people videoing their dogs. It's the funny dog thing. There are dogs that are doing that. They're running into lampposts. They're running into things. They're falling into things because they're distracted. So this isn't just us that's doing it. There's
Yeah,
something on an energetic, because obviously animals are on a totally different plane of existence here, but they're experiencing the same
yeah,
things of
yeah,
this level of distraction.
yeah. The cats are doing the same thing as well. Okay, you'll start seeing them becoming forgetful. Where do they live? We'll be looking for our cats more and more because it's almost like they're getting some form of dementia. But it's cat brain fog. Okay.
A cat brain fart, right?
Fog, fog. F-G, not fart. Jeez,
But
woman.
that creates the fog, right?
Like my cats at the moment are coming in and they're sitting on top of us, sitting on top
Yep.
of me. I would have this when I had my night terrors. Now the night terrors for me is just, okay, you're about to access another dimension. It's just
Mm,
those are the symptoms of you going into the next dimension. And in some of these dimensions that I seem to decide I'm going to go into before I'm even aware to, the
mm.
cat will get on my back and it's like a warning, don't go too far. don't go too far. I'm going to stay here until you get back. You
It's
know,
almost like a grounding. It's almost like
it's
bringing you back. It's a grounding, right?
I think it's also protecting
Yep.
me from other walk-ins or other entities coming back into this vessel because I've had a cat fight happen on top of me between my own cats, and they ended up both sitting on top of me. So yeah, there was a big one going on that one. So yeah.
Wow.
You
Wow.
know, there's a heck of a lot more that is going on that we don't visually see, but our senses are registering and we're picking up on them. It just comes down to whether or not we're going to accept the sensibilities that we have, the abilities, and the symptoms, the knowledges and the awarenesses that we have them are the sense of abilities. So sensibilities. You might have it. I'm hearing a lot of people talking about, okay, now if you listen to the actual ringing, when you think you've got tinnitus and stuff, and it's constant, dun 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 dun, dun, instead of fighting it, listen to it. Okay, listen to it. Can you hear something within it? Why are you so alert that you can hear it? Is it set up to be a distraction from what you're trying to achieve at the moment? I see us, when we're talking about the SSP, that's never gone away. We're in training full on 24/7. There's no such thing as time, but 24/7, we are locked into this training program. I see it as an experimental environment. We're all genetically manipulated one way or another. Our foods are all synthetic. They're all genetically manipulated. Now they've got, the AI coming into play. That's always been here.
Mhm.
I see some of the stars, they claim stars. I see them as old technology, old satellites that are stuck out there in space. And the whole space war is,
Stuck in the
the
firmament. Stuck in
yeah,
the firmament.
yeah, the space race, the space wars was to get the hell up there and get that technology and get it started down here. It's always been here and it's been drip, 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 drip. The technology that we have that we're playing with right now is nothing in comparison to what they've got. And
And
when we
you
use our,
you touched on this, the stars and seeing that they're fixed in the firmament and the firmament is in this rotation, and that's why when you see the certain astral energies are coming up and they rotate around. So this is evening, and now it's morning and the sun comes up, so as there's this whole rotation thing that goes on. But I guess the thing is too is it's that there's like an energetic, like a perspective. I often wonder what would the here in the US, if the sun were completely darkened, what would the skies look like? What energies would we see? We're not going to see the same lights in the
no,
sky. I mean, it's just very different. And bringing about the tinnitus, one of the things too that is influencing that buzzing, because I do have, it's almost like a very faint white noise, but one of the things that is manifesting that for many of us is not just the EMF coming from these towers that they've installed. It's also coming from what might be considered or is considered dirty electricity. So you
yeah,
have all these wires in your home and you feel like you're protected because you don't have any cognizance of what's happening to you in that particular aspect of your biome. You're not necessarily aware of it. I mean, let's look at Madame Curie. She didn't realize
yeah,
she was exposing herself to this radiation. So we are in that same situation that some of this, and I've heard people talk about how when they were away from this dirty electricity that's coming into your homes, they're away from the EMF from these towers and Wi-Fi and all the technology that, I mean, you could put something like a WEAP and then put on, um, and then put energetic in front of that. Anyway, so it's like it's something that's energetic. We can get away from all that. This goes away. That what we're calling tinnitus or tinnitus is that. It's what our biome is reacting to and what we're exposed to. And oh God, I needed to get I'm
yeah.
something
When,
that you
when
talked about earlier though. It had when you were talking about when you were trying to escape and you saw in the reflection that you were an orb of light. Yes?
energy, yeah,
So there's a young man and his wife who do, and he's quite famous, who do the paranormal investigations. If you want to look him up, his I met him at here in Michigan. His name is Kalani, Kalani, and his wife, lovely people. They were talking about one of the things that they encountered in their investigations is they always assumed that these entities that they encounter and have these interactions with are people that have passed, are from the past. And they felt like they were being chased in at one of the videos I had watched them in after I had met them. And it was like, that's a really interesting concept. When they started having dialogue with this entity was actually seeing them as the lights, as the specters. And they were this being perceived them as orbs, as light, as specters. So it's all about your perspective. So whatever was chasing you may have seen you the way you saw yourself in the reflection.
Yeah, well, that's what I say. They saw me as that orb of energy. When they stepped into my dimension, when I managed to find my way back in, when they followed, one of them followed me in, he came in as a shadow being. And after seeing that shadow being, because it was the reflection of light from his dimension, da 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 da,
Yep.